Imagine stepping onto like a massive debate stage, right?
Yeah.
In front of millions of people. Your first instinct, almost inevitably, is to project.
Right, you want to fill the room.
Exactly. You want to completely dominate the space, be the absolute loudest voice, and, just make sure your arguments totally crush the opposition.
It's a very common reflex.
Because we have this culturally ingrained assumption that, well, whoever holds the biggest megaphone just automatically wins the public discourse. But this is the crazy part. What if you actually look closely at the history and you realize that the loudest, most aggressive voices actually drive like the least amount of sustainable change?
That's a really fascinating contradiction. I mean, we treat public engagement as this sudden dramatic performance, like a grand debut.
Yeah.
Yet the reality of genuine social transformation is, well, it's the absolute opposite. It's a profoundly quiet, long-term maturation process. It happens entirely behind the scenes, long before anyone ever steps up to a podium.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad to have you here. Yes, you, the learner. We always curate these discussions specifically with you in mind, so you can get all this thorough knowledge without, feeling totally overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
So today, we are exploring a really compelling article from the Human and AI Learning Institute, the HALE Institute. And it's the first installment in a series that analyzes Ruhi Book 14, Unit 1, Chapter 1.
Right. And that chapter is titled Participating in Public Discourse, the Nature of Our Contribution.
Exactly. Now, if you aren't super familiar with Ruhi Book 14, it's basically part of a global curriculum designed to build grassroots community capacity. So it's less about like high-level academic theory and much more about providing a very practical, on-the-ground framework.
Yeah, a framework for real social action.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how we actually prepare for public discourse. We're deconstructing that whole megaphone myth.
The core theme we're really pulling from this source material is that the capacity to engage in society, it doesn't just spontaneously appear.
You don't just wake up with it.
Exactly. You don't wake up, read the morning news, and suddenly possess the exact toolkit needed to change the world's conversations. Instead, public discourse is the natural extension of capacities that we've been practicing for years.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the article breaks this down into a very specific 4-stage developmental arc. And I want to start with the absolute foundation, stage 1.
Which the text refers to as the inner conversation.
Right. And I was thinking about this. It feels a lot like stretching before a really heavy workout.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because it's totally invisible to the audience, right? Nobody is cheering for you while you stretch. But if you don't do it, you're going to tear a muscle when you finally try to lift the heavy weights of public discourse.
That is a perfect analogy, because the source identifies 4 necessary components to this inner conversation. It requires reflection, clarity of motive, spiritual perception, and alignment with principle.
So it's very internal.
Very internal. To use your workout metaphor, it means really scrutinizing your own motives before you even enter the gym. Like, why are you entering a conversation at all? Is it to assert your own dominance, or is it to actually understand someone else?
Wow. Yeah.
Because if you skip this internal calibration, your outward action, no matter how eloquent you sound, they will eventually reveal a motive that is blurred or self-serving. This solitary work is the bedrock.
So wait, this leads to something I was wondering. Is it possible to be great at community level conversation, but terrible at the inner conversation? Or do they absolutely rely on each other?
This raises an important question, and Book 14 views this as a very strict sequence. You really can't fake the outer stages if the inner stages are hollow.
It just eventually collapses.
Precisely, which brings us naturally to stage 2, which is the interpersonal conversation.
Right, taking those internal principles and finally testing them with like 1 or 2 other people.
Yes. The text specifically points to practices like home visits and devotional gatherings.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, a home visit in this context isn't just, dropping off a casserole for a neighbor. It's an intentional effort to sit down and elevate the dialogue about your shared reality.
Exactly. And a devotional gathering is bringing people together to reflect on deeper spiritual or ethical principles.
Okay, so what's the actual goal when you're in those intimate settings?
Well, the objective completely shifts. It's no longer just about forming your own solitary thoughts. It's about practicing deep sustained listening.
Which is really hard to do.
It is. You are learning to articulate complex ideas, but doing it with genuine humility. The text really emphasizes that the goal here is to uplift the other person, to co-investigate a topic, rather than trying to, debate them into submission.
Right, it's not a competition.
No, not at all. It's a laboratory for sincerity.
Okay, but what happens when you introduce more people? Because mastering a one-on-one chat is one thing, but the moment you add a third or fourth person, the complexity just explodes.
Oh, absolutely. And that leap lands us right in stage 3, the community level conversation.
Because you can't just jump from your living room straight to the United Nations.
Exactly. You need a mid-level proving ground. So the source points to environments like children's classes, junior youth groups, and study circles.
Let's define those really quickly. A study circle is essentially a small, collaborative group that explores a text together to uncover reality and make collective decisions, right?
Yes, exactly.
And a junior youth group is a space where young adolescents are mentored to analyze the constructive and destructive forces in their society, and they plan local service projects.
Right. These aren't just casual social clubs, they are literal training grounds for public discourse. Imagine a neighborhood study circle trying to organize a community garden in a vacant lot.
Oh man, the drama.
Right. You immediately encounter a huge diversity of perspectives. One neighbor is stressed about funding, another is worried about vandalism, someone else is arguing about who gets the actual produce.
So in stage 3, you are forced to apply that deep listening from stage 2, but to a whole group dynamic.
Precisely. You aren't just compromising, you are trying to synthesize differing views into a unified plan. It demands an immense amount of patience.
So it's basically the ultimate stress test for your inner conversation.
It really is. And according to the Hale Institute article, it is only after you have spent years navigating these local complexities that you are truly prepared for stage 4.
Which is public discourse.
Exactly. Stage 4 is simply extending all those capacities you've built into the wider society. Because you've been navigating opposing viewpoints in your neighborhood for a decade, stepping onto a larger stage doesn't overwhelm you.
It's a seamless transition. Okay, so now that we have this 4-stage map, I want to pivot slightly, because here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, definitely.
I want to look at the anatomy of the conversations themselves. What makes one of these interactions actually effective? Because the text draws a very sharp line between a meaningful conversation and what it calls just a conversation.
Yes, the distinction there is crucial.
And the metric it uses is so fascinating. It says a conversation is meaningful when, and I love this phrasing, when something inside moves.
It is such a profound diagnostic tool. The source details that this inner movement happens when understanding deepens, or when a sense of unity increases between the people talking.
Or when truth just becomes a little bit clearer.
Exactly. Notice that the metric has absolutely nothing to do with whether someone, quote unquote, won the argument.
Right. It has nothing to do with having a perfectly polished monologue.
Yeah.
But the text also points out the exact opposite, right? It explains when a conversation degrades into just a conversation.
Yeah, it says that happens when the discussion drifts, when it becomes reactive, when clarity decreases, and when unity weakens.
And the main culprit it points to for that drift is ego.
Yes, ego is the primary disruptor.
So let me push back on this just a little bit, keeping in mind the cultural water we all swim in today. In a world where we are constantly taught to build our personal brand or establish a platform, isn't a little ego necessary to even get involved in public discourse? Or is ego the exact thing that causes the conversation to drift?
Well, the source makes a very important distinction here between the ambition to contribute and the ambition to simply be seen.
Oh, that's a great point.
If your primary engine is building a personal brand, the conversation becomes fundamentally transactional. You're using the discourse, and often the other people in it, as props to elevate yourself.
So you aren't really co-investigating reality anymore.
Right. You are just protecting the fortress of your own identity. You stop listening and start scanning for weaknesses in the other person's armor. And the text insists that ego actively dilutes the search for truth because it centers the individual rather than the collective.
Meaning unity becomes totally impossible.
Exactly, because the very mechanism required for unity, which is vulnerability and open-mindedness, has been completely shut down by the ego. A truly meaningful conversation demands that you care more about the insight the group generates than who gets the credit for it.
Wow. Okay, so if we are actively kicking ego out of the room to stop the conversation from drifting, how do we keep it on track?
That's where structure comes in.
Right. But how do we maintain focus without turning every single coffee shop chat into some rigid, soul-crushing corporate boardroom meeting?
It's a valid fear. The word structure usually carries all these negative connotations of, like, stiffness or endless bureaucracy.
Yeah, totally.
But the Hale Institute analysis of Book 14 redefines a structured conversation simply as an intentional conversation.
Intentional.
Yes, it means the interaction possesses a purpose, a principle, a direction, and a rhythm.
You know, while I was reviewing this section, it instantly reminded me of playing jazz music.
Oh, I love that analogy. How so?
Well, to an outsider who doesn't play an instrument, a jazz performance looks completely spontaneous. It feels incredibly casual, like they're just doing whatever they feel like in the moment.
Right, it looks totally freeform.
Exactly. But the reality is that those musicians are relying on a deeply structured, rigorously practiced foundation of music theory, time signatures, and rhythm. They can only have that ultimate freedom on the surface because the underlying structure is rock solid.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly that maps onto the source's intent. The structure Book 14 advocates for is an invisible spine of intention. It's the music theory beneath the interaction.
So it doesn't have to be formal at all.
Not at all. Crucially, the text notes that a structured conversation can be totally casual in tone. It can be warm, it can happen spontaneously over a kitchen table, yet still possess a profound direction.
The invisible spine keeps it from just drifting into gossip.
Exactly. Contrast that with a highly formal meeting. We've all been in a meeting with strict agendas and formal titles that achieves absolutely nothing.
Oh, too many times.
Right, because despite the outward suit and tie, it lacks a true underlying purpose. It's unstructured in the ways that actually matter.
Okay, so this brings us to a huge question. Someone listening right now might be thinking, okay, I understand the jazz theory, I know the principles. Why can't I just bypass all the slow community building and jump straight onto the public stage today?
It's tempting, isn't it?
Extremely.
Yeah.
So, what does this all mean for us? Why must we wait? This leads to what I think is the most profound insight in the entire text: the reality that identity and capacity must precede discourse.
Yes. The overarching theme of Chapter 1 is that public discourse is not just a skill you tack onto your resume. It is an organic expression of your established identity.
It's who you are.
Exactly. The traits required for effective discourse, like deep empathy, moral reasoning, and the ability to synthesize opposing views, those are forged into your character through years of community building.
And the damage of skipping those early stages is just catastrophic. I mean, look at modern internet comment sections.
Oh, a perfect example.
Or those fraught office meetings. They are prime examples of what happens when people bypass the inner conversation, skip the humble listening of stage 2, ignore the consensus building of stage 3, and just grab the megaphone in stage 4.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the results are highly predictable. The source actually lists them explicitly. Defensiveness, polarization, overconfidence, shallow analysis, and ultimately either aggression or complete withdrawal.
Because they just can't handle the friction.
Right. When someone without a firmly established, principled identity steps into the pressure cooker of public discourse, they just revert to ideological reactivity.
Because they haven't built the muscles to carry the weight yet. It fundamentally reframes the whole concept, doesn't it? Public discourse is an act of service, not a performance.
Precisely. It's about contributing to humanity's collective search for truth. And when you view it as an act of service, the pressure to win totally evaporates.
It's replaced by a quiet maturation.
Yes. The transition is moving from spontaneous interactions to intentional ones, to principled ones, and finally to socially constructive conversations.
Wow. Well, as we wrap up today's deep dive, let's just briefly recap this incredible journey. We started by dismantling the myth of the megaphone. Engaging with society isn't a loud, sudden debut.
No, it is a 4-stage developmental arc.
Right. It begins with that inner conversation, stretching before the workout, calibrating our motives. Then we practice those principles interpersonally through deep listening. After that, we stress test those skills communally in places like study circles.
Navigating all the messy group dynamics.
Exactly. And only then do we extend those capacities into public discourse. Book 14 isn't introducing something entirely new, it's extending the familiar. We learn that meaningful conversations are measured by inner movement, and that ego just causes drift.
And we explored how structure is like jazz, an invisible spine of intention.
Because your identity absolutely has to precede your discourse. Otherwise, you're just adding to the noise.
It really is a rigorous framework. And I want to leave everyone with a final thought to mull over.
Please do.
If public discourse is an expression of our established identity, and our identity is shaped by our daily, private, inner conversations, what does the quality of your own internal monologue right now predict about the impact you will have on the world tomorrow?
Wow. That is definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking those aha moments in your daily interactions. Keep checking that internal compass, and we will see you next time.